Welcome everyone to our weekly Tiger Talk series. My name is Lindsay Bray. I am the Senior Coordinator for Parent and Family Services here at the University of Memphis. Today we have Tara Buchanan, who is the Director of our Disability Resources for Students Office. And she's here to tell us about the services their office has for our students and how they can really help to support your students. So welcome, Tara. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. And I'd like to say welcome to everyone else that's joining us to hear about this awesome services that we provide.
So speaking of that, can you tell us a little bit about your office and kind of what it really does for our students?
Sure. So Disability Resources for Students is the department on campus that has been charged with advocating for equal access for students with disabilities. And we do that in a variety of ways. So one way is to work with the campus community in the design phase of our different environments. So the physical environment, the classroom environment, to create an environment that is immediately inclusive, to reduce the need for students to make individual requests for access. However, we will never fully be able to anticipate the diversity of disability. And so there is always a need to have an accommodation process and to work with individuals on accommodations. So that is another way that our office works to level the playing field for students with disabilities, is through meeting with students, learning about them, their experience, and any barriers that they either anticipate or may experience. And then we work with them to come up with accommodations that will provide the needed access. And then finally, we do some educational programming on campus just to dispel myths and reduce the stigma of the disability identity or status.
So for our students who want to utilize your services and get those accommodations, do they need to register with your office? And how does that process work?
Okay. Well, we've done a lot of work to make the process as simple as it possibly can be. Once the student has been accepted to the university, they can start the process immediately. The first step is to complete an online student introduction form. That form, you just be giving us some information about you, what the disability is, and then what are some things that you're thinking you might need. When we receive that form, we reach out to you immediately to schedule the initial appointment. And right now we're doing initial appointments by phone or by video conferencing. Okay. And that will likely continue even when we are back face to face. We will give students options on which they would like to do. During the initial appointment, we talk about this, if there's been any history of utilizing accommodations in the educational environment. We talk about, what the student anticipates might be the needs, and then we share our knowledge about what the environment is like and what we anticipate might be some of the barriers that are experienced. And then we decide on an accommodation plan, which is fluid. So the accommodation plan that we talk about in the initial appointment, it is not necessarily the final plan, because as I mentioned earlier, we may not anticipate something that is a barrier down the road. And so the students always have the opportunity to come back to us and say, hey, I'm experiencing something in my class and I feel like we need to talk about it to see if there's an accommodation that can be provided. And so in that way, it's never final.
So if a student decides that that they don't want to register initially, do they have to do it when they first come to the university, or is there a time limit, or can they register with your office at any point while they're enrolled here?
They can register at any point during the semester, or prior to the semester beginning. So they do not have to register immediately, although it is highly recommended, because once you are connected with the office, then you get to determine whether or not you use the accommodations that we've come up with. So you may register with the office and find out that your courses are completely accessible, and so you're good to go, and then you choose not to use the accommodation. So it's always recommended that as soon as you register, or as soon as you are accepted to the university, that you would go ahead and register, but you don't have to. You can certainly wait until later. One thing I did want to mention too, I talked about the student information, or the student introduction form, which is the first step of our process, the initial appointment, which is the second step of our process. I want to talk a little bit, if I may, about documentation. And, you know, we do not want documentation to be a barrier. Because we don't want documentation to be a barrier, we will do the initial appointment before any documentation is submitted, because part of documenting the condition is learning about your student's history, learning about the experience that they're having with their condition. And then we can talk more about what type of documents are needed to support ongoing accommodations. So if you don't have anything right away, you can still go ahead and connect with us by completing the student introduction form. If your student had an IEP or a 504 plan in high school, you can certainly go ahead and submit the most recent plan to us. It's very likely that that will document what's needed to go forward, and we may not need anything else. So I'm going to recommend that you give us whatever is readily available, and if we need more, then we will ask for more.
So speaking of about those parents of students who had those plans, many of them are very used to being involved in their student and advocating for their students. Can you talk a little bit about how their role changes once their student is at the university, and what might be some ways that they can help their student through this process, but also help them grow as well?
Sure. So, I mean, obviously, our staff is very understanding of this transition, because it's a changing relationship between the parent and the student, right? And that is difficult. So we want to be very understanding of that. And we also know that oftentimes parents do have a lot of information to offer. And so we certainly want to be open to them being able to share. And we will talk to parents at any time. It's just what we are allowed to share changes once your student gets registered with our office. And so certainly feel free to assist them through the process. If your student is okay with it, we're fine if you want to join for the initial appointment. We do like to start out by gathering information from the student and finding out what their thoughts are, to get them used to what their role will be in advocating for themselves. And then it's okay, certainly, once we've gathered information from the students, for parents to chime in and say, oh, I would like, to share one more detail with you, or, whatever it is that perhaps we missed in the conversation. So we certainly want to welcome parents to partner with us. Once the semester begins and the student is registered, we still welcome you to contact us. At that point, we won't be able to share specific details about the student, but we can certainly talk in generalities about what we would do in certain circumstances, what our process is in certain circumstances. So if you have questions, we can share. We can also give you advice about next steps and maybe how to handle that specific situation with your student. Um, trying to think. Oh, and one other thing that actually we're talking about trying to do in collaboration with Parent and Family Services is to have a support group, right, for parents of students with disabilities who are going through this change, and just allowing them to um, work together with one another and to support one another through this transition, because it is also a transition for parents as well as the students.
Yes, it is a big transition for all of our parents, and
Yes.
particularly those who have been very, very involved in their student and really still want to be there to help as well. So speaking of kind of helping, if a parent sees that their student is struggling and thinks that they might have a need for an accommodation or might be displaying something that they need some help with. Is there testing on campus? Is that something they can do through your office, or do you partner with another office? How do you recommend that is kind of how to help a student in that way?
Sure. So we have the counseling center on campus that provides some academic testing for students who are struggling and can identify if there is perhaps an underlying cause, such as attention deficit disorder or maybe an undiagnosed learning disability. Uh, Mental health condition, because oftentimes mental health conditions, that is when a college age is typically when they start to show themselves. So certainly you can go through the counseling center to have some very, very low cost testing. I don't know the exact cost, but I'm going to say it is in the range of around $300, which is a bargain. If you go to private practitioners, you're looking at anywhere from, $800 to $1,500 in order to get such an evaluation. So it is a great resource that we do offer to students.
And we'll actually have a Tiger Talk, I believe, in a couple of weeks with them as well, so we can get a little bit more information. So once a student is registered with your office, what are some of the accommodations that might be offered to them? Are there anything that they might need, that they might be used to, that aren't offered now that they're in college?
Okay, good question. So some of the typical, well, first let me say that accommodations are decided on a case-by-case basis. So with not even a condition by condition basis, but just depending on, again, that specific student's report of what are the barriers that they're experiencing or that they may anticipate. So but some very common accommodations that are typical in higher education are like testing accommodations. So things like extended time for testing in a reduced distraction environment. We do pretty commonly text conversion. So what text conversion is taking the printed word and converting it to an alternate format, oftentimes an electronic format that can be enlarged, or that someone can use technology to actually listen to the book while they're reading along. Or for in the case where students are completely blind, they may only listen to the book. And so that's something that we do quite often. Another accommodation is assisting students with taking notes in classes. And so there are various ways to capture the information that's given. We may have we may ask the professor to share a copy of their PowerPoints to guide the student in taking their notes. We may ask or recommend that a student who is unable to take their own notes at all have a copy of a classmate's notes. We also have some software that assists with taking notes that we can upload to students. So those are probably the main accommodations. A couple of other things I should mention though, communication accommodations. So for example, today, we are making closed captions available. And so if you are needing to use the captions, there should be an icon at the bottom that you can click on, and someone is typing what I am saying. And so that is another accommodation that we might provide in the classroom, as well as things like sign language interpreters or real-time captioning in the classroom. You said, what are things that are not accommodations? So anything, sometimes the transition can be a little bit more difficult from high school to college because there may have been things that were provided that actually modified the curriculum. So we won't do anything that modifies the curriculum or reduces the rigor of courses. So for example, a student may have been given on a multiple choice test, the rest of the class may get 4 multiple choice answers, and a student may be given only 2 multiple choice answers to choose from. So those kinds of modifications are not made at the college level. What we are simply trying to do is to level the playing field so that they can compete with their own skills and abilities. So we make modifications to the environment. Something else that we will not do is we don't remediate. We don't, tutoring is not an accommodation at the college level either. However, I always like to let parents know that we have so much free tutoring available for students. I think you can get tutoring in every class that you're taking. So it's certainly available. It's just not something that is done through the Disability Resource Center.
Yes, very true about our tutoring services. They are very well available, a really great service for all of our students, and all available online now too, I know. So
Yes.
Dr. Barbara Beckus has done an amazing job with that. So what, do you all offer any kind of career programs for students within your office, or something like that?
Yes, so we actually do have something called our First Hires program. First Hires is designed for students who have not previously had any work experience to get campus jobs so that they can develop their resume and begin to develop their working skills. So currently we have one student in our office who from the First Hires program, and also we have had students get positions at the union service desk. We've had students also in the residence halls on the First Hires program. And so we're hoping that we will be able to continue that program and to actually expand our partnerships on that and find other areas on campus that are willing to offer jobs to students with disabilities who just haven't had an opportunity yet to get some employment experience.
Well, I'll have to remember that one when our next student worker job comes open as well. So in working with these students, are there any other programs that you all offer that students can take advantage of?
Sure. So every student that registers with our office also gets something called priority registration, which means that they will get to choose their courses as soon as early registration opens up. So there's what is nice about that is that almost every student with a disability has a need to set up their schedule in a way that works for them, whether it's due to a medication that they might be taking, sleep schedule that they need to keep. It may be due to the fact that they need extended time for tests, and so they need to schedule their courses in such a way that they can get that extended time. Um, but there are just a variety of reasons. So it's nice to have the first selection of courses. Um, and in addition to that, we also have academic coaching in our office. And so our academic coach is currently still working with students over the summer via video conferencing, and just working on things like setting academic goals, developing skills, keeping up with assignments, setting a schedule, and helping the student to be very involved in their own academic success. And so this is something that I would recommend that any student with a disability take advantage of. And maybe it's just, you know, you need one or two appointments, and then that's good because you've had a person that you can reach out to and say, hey, you know, I don't know about this one thing, can you help? And then they've helped, and then you don't need it ever again. But some students really benefit from weekly ongoing academic coaching appointments. And so that's also available through our office.
It's a fantastic service to offer to our students to really kind of help them stay on track. So to kind of wrap up our conversation, can you just talk a little bit more about why it's so important for students to register with you early, and to really utilize those services? We know that sometimes students, when they come from high school, feel the stigma, and then they may get here and not want to register or not think they need them. But can you talk a little bit, just kind of a little bit more about that, and why it's so important to do that early, and just kind of go ahead and get in the system and have those if they need them?
Sure. So I think the first thing that I'd like to address is the stigma of disability. And so one thing that I think is very important is that the staff in our office, our belief is that disability is just about the variation of the human experience. And so, you know, my experience is going to be different than someone else's, and that's just about being human. The issue of disability is that historically, the educational environment hasn't been constructed in a way as if people with disabilities were going to take advantage of it. And so it really is just about modifying the environment to allow a variety of people to participate. And to demonstrate their knowledge. So if your student is concerned about stigma, if you share with them that is our philosophy, and that is certainly what we try to communicate to faculty and to other students on campus. Hopefully that will help them feel a little more comfortable connecting with our office. Secondly, students are transitioning to a completely new environment, and it is important to set yourself up for success, especially that first semester. So again, I just want to reiterate that, if connect with us, they get to pick and choose when they use those accommodations. And so they may set up, let's say, they connect with us, they're registered, and they're eligible for extended time for testing. And they choose to use it on that first test. But after they've taken that first test, then they have a much better feel for what the next test is going to be like. And then they can choose at that point not to use the accommodation going forward. Whereas if they don't use the accommodation on the first test and learn, oh my goodness, I really could have used that extra time to show my knowledge, then obviously they're just kind of stuck with that performance, and then they have to add the accommodation on the next test. So really, it's better to set yourself up for success going forward, and then pick and choose when you will and will not use the accommodations as you move through your academic career. And believe me, we see a lot of students that wait. and when those warning grades come out, they're rushing. We have a mad rush to our office getting things set up. So
I am sure you do. I'm sure there are a lot of students out there who are realize too late, or a little later than they should, that they need to utilize those. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Are there any other last words of wisdom that you would like to say to our parents as they're kind of coming in and joining our Tiger family?
Sure. Well, first of all, this is a great family to be a part of. So welcome, and we're happy to have you. Two additional things I want you to be aware of. Our office also serves students with temporary conditions. So if your tiger breaks their dominant hand, we're hoping that doesn't happen, but if they do, they should come see us for note-taking assistance and maybe a little extended time on tests and help filling out all those bubbles, right, on the bubble sheets. So be thinking about that. Also, we are the department that has been designated to hear any COVID-19 related responses, whether that is disability related or not. So it could be age related. It could be that I am a student that lives with someone that is high risk. And so I need an accommodation to maybe take my courses remotely. So just wanted to share that piece with you. Again, the process would still be the same. You would go in, you would fill out that student introduction form, and that would be for temporary, for COVID related, or for more permanent disability accommodations.
Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. We really appreciate it, and we're really excited, and we really hope our parents will kind of take advantage and help their students along the way. So thank you all for joining us today. Just as a reminder, we will have a second Tiger Talk for this week, since we're doubling up, and we will have Residence Life tomorrow at noon. So we hope you can join us for that one as well. So thank you so much. We look forward to seeing y'all very soon. Bye.
Bye.